Hey guys, Kevin here with Victory 4x4, and today I'm going to walk you through a strike bumper install for the Lexus GX 460. Now the first step is to remove this front fascia so that we can pull out the headlight washer hoses as well as the sensor wire harness to reinstall those into the new bumper. Now we did this disassembly during our Blitz installation, so we'll show you those clips now. First step in getting this out of the way is going to be to remove this interior plastic piece here from under the hood. And in order to do that, it's just held in with a bunch of plastic push pins that are as simple as pushing the centers down and then lifting them up either with a pry tool, or in a lot of cases you can just kind of wiggle this panel and get them to pop up out of their hole. Now you're going to want to save these as you pop them up out of here, because this will go back in later on. With all those clips out of the way, simply remove this plastic panel and set it to the side for now. Now with that panel out of the way, you're just going to have 4 10mm screw heads up here that you're going to have to remove. Now with the top of that grill freed up, you can come down here to each of your inner fender areas. Again, using your 10mm, you'll have 4 screws that need to be removed to free this up from the inner fender. These clips may require just a little bit of help from a flat blade screwdriver to kind of get behind here and pry them, and that'll free it up from this fascia. Now here underneath the front of the vehicle, it looks like we've got about 8 more screws to remove, again using our 10mm. In our case, this vehicle is already equipped with our lower skid plates, so if yours is factory and still has a factory splash guard or skid in place here, yours may be just a little bit different. Just know that that skid will need to be removed before this install. Now again, with some of the clips down here, you'll just need the help of your flat screwdriver to help get these removed and freed up from the fascia. Now with all those screws removed, you can start pulling this fascia free here around the fender as well as up around the headlight. And there it's just going to be held in with some push-in clips. So you just need to get your hand in here behind this inner fender, get a good grip on it, and then start pulling kind of out with a little bit of force. You don't want to go too crazy and damage any of that, but once one comes, they all start to come free pretty easily. Now, leaving it about like that, it'll allow you enough room to access in here and get to the electrical connectors as well as hoses you need to remove before getting this all the way off. All right, now we took the liberty of pulling our inner fender a little farther out of the way to kind of be able to show you guys what you got to get to here. But one thing you're going to need to remove on each side is this fog light connector here. And then on the driver's side, you'll have this front bumper harness connector here that needs to be removed before this thing can be separated from the vehicle. So now that you have all the electrical disconnected on both the driver and passenger side, you can come over here to the passenger side, and on this headlight sprayer system, you can see we just lightly clamped a pair of vice grips here to stop the flow of this fluid so that we can disconnect those sprayers from the vehicle and allow us to remove this front fascia. Now that you have all those connectors, clips, screws, and everything out of the way, you're just going to come up here, kind of front and center on this setup. You can get a good grip on the grill somewhere down here, good grip up top, and you can kind of wiggle all this free. There's just a few more retainers that run along the center there that were the last thing holding that up. Now there is an alternative method if you didn't want to use vice grips or something to pinch off that rubber line for fear of damaging it. You can remove this whole sprayer system from the front fascia. And in order to do that, you got to start by removing these sprayers. So you'll pull out the front like this. There's just a small plastic tab on top that you can get removed with your fingernail or a small screwdriver. And then on the back side of it here, you'll need to remove this metal clip, slide the white plastic portion down, And that'll allow you to pinch the tab in here on the front side and release that hole sprayer from the bumper. Now once you've done that on both sides, then you'll need to come across the front edge of the bumper here and remove all the clips holding that hose in place. And that would allow you to leave this entire system connected, not have to worry about spilling any of that fluid along the way. Now with the front fascia removed, the next step is to get this factory crash bar out of the way. In order to do that, you're going to have 4 bolts per side. There's 3 out here on the outside of the frame, 1 on the inside, and those are going to be using a 14mm wrench. And that can go right in the trash. Now with our bumper fascia on the ground, we can get these washer hoses as well as this wire harness removed. For these 2 center sensors, those were already removed during our Blitz install, so we'll show you that clip now. Now the next thing you need to do is get these 2 center proximity sensors removed from the bumper so that you can transfer those into the new one. In order to do that, you've kind of got just a push tab here on one side of this that you can pinch with your finger. And then on the other side, there's a small plastic tab that actually needs to be pressed in while you lift the entire sensor assembly off of this cage housing. Now with that off to the side, this cage housing needs to be removed as well. It simply has a black plastic tab on each side of it that can be depressed, and then that entire cage can be pushed out through the front of the grill. Now we'll simply reuse these cages to install these sensors into the new bumper. For the rest of the harness, it's going to be held in with a bunch of zip tie style clips here through the center, as well as these 2 little push clips that are holding in this hose. So simply pull that out. You will have 2 more clips right in here that we've also already removed. Now on these zip tie style clips, you can get a pry tool behind them, get them popped out of there and save them, but there's not really any reason to do so because we're not reusing them. So I'm just going to take some wire cutters and, using care not to damage the harness or the hose, I'm just going to snip these and free that up from the bumper cover. And right here, these are just connected with a small piece of electrical tape. So again, you can just cut that. Now here on the outside, you'll need to disconnect this light wiring connector and pull the small clip holding it in place. That's just kind of a press-on pressure style clip. And to get these outer sensors disconnected, there's just 2 tabs that need to be pulled out, and then that sensor slides straight back out of its connection. Then to remove these headlight sprayers, simply get your finger behind the edge of this cap and pull straight out. And then holding this down here and using a small screwdriver or pry tool up top, you can release this tab to pop your cover off. And then set that to the side. Then come in to the back side here, and there's going to be a small metal retainer that you can just pull off, which allows you to slide the white portion of this sprayer down. You can kind of see how that moves. And with that pushed back, there's 2 tabs here on the outside, one of which you'll need to pinch in. And that allows you to rock that sprayer and pull it out of the back side of the fascia. That'll free all that stuff up from the bumper so you can get it installed to the new one. Now on the 10 to 13 models, the disassembly process is going to be incredibly similar. However, these headlight sprayers come apart a little bit different, so I'll show you that now. So to get these out, using a 10mm socket, you're going to have 1 small bolt right here to remove. And just to give you some context, this is kind of underneath the headlight once this fascia is installed. And with that out of the way, simply with your fingernails, get behind this cover. You can pull this assembly out. And then there's 2 tabs holding this cover in place back here that need to be freed up to get this off. So for that, just kind of rock the top of this forward and give it a little wiggle, and that should free up both of those tabs. After that, you can release this back in, and then there's 1 tab here toward the inside that can be pushed in, allowing you to rock this entire thing back and slide it off of its mount. So to lay out our cut, we're going to measure and mark 3 key points on each side of the vehicle. So for our first mark, we'll come up right here where the fascia meets this corner of the headlight, and using our tape, we'll make a line straight down, trying to stay perpendicular to the ground. You want to try and get that tape to lay as nice and smooth and flat as you can. For one, because you're going to be marking on it, but also then you know it's laying pretty nice and straight. And then using our flexible tape measure, coming from the corner of the fascia down along the edge of your tape. You'll make a mark at 7.5 inches. Next, we're going to place a tape line 2 inches below this body line, making sure to cover the majority of this front face. Now, just be aware, depending on what tape you wind up using, some of this painter's tape is actually just a little bit narrower than 2 inches, so you'll want to compensate for that when placing the tape here. Now with that in place, we can make our next couple marks. Next, measuring from the point in here where this body line terminates out along the top edge of our tape line, we'll make a mark at 11.25 inches. And then using some sort of square, we'll carry that line perpendicular to our tape down to the bottom edge. So our second point is going to be here, where that line intersects with the bottom edge of our cut line. And then the third point will be here, where our tape intersects with this body line. Now, using the points we just marked as a reference, along with the help of a laser level, which we are going to recommend for this install just to make it a little bit easier to make these nice straight lines, we'll carry this line all the way through to the front edge of the grill and mark that with another piece of tape. All right, next we'll make a straight line between these 2 points with our laser level and then mark that cut line with tape. Next, using our tape measure, we'll measure from this point here at the back edge of the fascia down 1 inch. And here you can see we've lined up our laser level with that point already. And then we'll connect that with the mark we made up here earlier, and then lay out that cut line with our blue tape. After that, we can go do the same thing over on the other side. Now that you have everything marked out on each side of the front fairing, you'll need to make a nice flat line all the way across the front from this point to this point. And if you look and can see here, that'll require you to cut this entire bottom row off just above this top flat section here. Now we'll show you where that lands on the older style grill after we've made our cut. Now as you guys can see, this fascia has already been cut, which we did that during our prototyping, but we wanted to be sure to show you guys how to cut this style grill. So for that, we set up our level again, connecting essentially this point here with this point here using a straight line. So to mark out our cut here, I'm just going to use a small piece of tape along with that laser line as a guide to know where to cut flat across the front of these chrome portions of the grill. And then here in the center, you're simply going to cut right along the top edges and remove this entire center rib. Now, to make this cut, we're going to use the same tool as we did on the rest of this fascia, which for the most part was just this cordless grinder with a cutoff disc installed. Now, after you make the cut, if you have any rough edges or anything like that left over, just throw on a sanding disc and clean those up. Now in order to make enough clearance for our bumper bracing, you're going to need to cut this inner air dam piece. Now you can kind of see how I've got it marked out here. Essentially you're taking a straight line across at the top edge of this indentation and then a line straight down here at the other edge, simply removing all that material. Now on the 10 to 13 models, you'll start by placing some tape roughly in the locations where we're going to be marking. And then to make our first mark, come back here at the point right at the back of the front fascia where it meets in this wheel well opening. And then measure down, basically forward toward the front of the vehicle, 1 inch from that point and make a mark. Next, you'll come forward to this point where the fascia, fender, and headlight all meet, and then letting your flexible tape drape straight down to the ground. You can measure down 7.5 inches and make another mark. For the next mark, using this body line out here on the front corner as a guide, you'll simply line your tape straight up with that and then carry that line all the way up to this headlight indentation here. So basically where these two lines intersect, both the headlight indentation and your tape, you'll measure back down 4 5/8, make another mark. And then lastly, you can come where the fascia, headlight, and grille all meet to this point here. Again, lining up your flexible tape, this time letting it drape straight down in the front of the vehicle. Get it set right on that point, and then make a mark 6 5/8 inches down. Then you can go do the same thing over on the other side. Now with all those points marked, using our laser as a guide and our tape as our straight cut line, knowing that we're going to be saving everything that's above this, I'm going to lay the tape above my laser line and connect these dots or marks that we made. Simply starting back here with the first mark we made and working our way to the front. So I'm going to connect these two together, and then stop here, then connect these two, and so on around the front of the fascia. And then again, using the bottom of this tape as our cut line, that kind of protects our painted surface up here, but feel free to tape as much of this as you want to or feel comfortable, feel like you need to. Now after you have both sides marked out, just connect the two right across the center. Now everything's marked out, we're all set to make our cut. Just one thing worth mentioning on this one before you get going. In these corners right here where this fascia meets the wheel opening, it may be worthwhile when you're making just the last couple inches of your cut here to pop it back out of its retainer like that and just kind of hold it with one hand, or you can even keep something behind here just to hold it out, because there is a metal portion of the fender mounting bracket behind there about an inch or so back. So you just want to be sure not to cut into that. Now, after you've made your cut, this is the perfect time to grab a friend and test fit your bumper and get it up here, get a good look at everything, see if you need to make any minor adjustments to these cuts. Now on the 10 to 13s, this is also going to be the perfect time to come back in here and reinstall these headlight sprayers, because you're able to pull this out far enough to access the bolt here under the headlight and get those reinstalled before your final assembly. Now on the newer versions, you'll want to do the same thing, get these headlight sprayers back installed so that you can route this hose and keep it up out of the way while you get the bumper installed. Now again, on the 10 to 13s, there's a small modification you're going to need to make on these air dam pieces here behind the bumper so that they can stay installed. So you can see I kind of got it marked out here. You just need to come up about an inch and in about another inch on this face, kind of mark that out and remove that material so that it'll clear our bumper bracing once installed. Now to get our tie-in bracket installed, you're going to begin by removing this clamp in here that locates this power steering line. So for that, you just need a 12mm socket to pull this bolt out of the side of the frame. And then with that bolt removed, you should be able to rotate this clamp enough that you can get a 10mm socket on the clamping bolt back here. Once you get that freed up enough that it pops off the line, go ahead and remove this rubber grommet that they have on here as well. And you can just discard all that because we'll replace it with something different later. To slide your tie-in bracket in, you'll just kind of need to pull this air dam off to the side, as well as this power steering line. And this should slip right down in here over top of the frame. Then you can leave those in place loose just like that until you get the bumper installed. Now at this point, we're gonna get our bumper prepped and ready for installation. So in these outside corner slots, we're gonna install our amber turn signal lights, simply mounting those to the back side of this face and bolting them in place using the black button head hardware, as well as nylock nuts on the back side. After that, using the provided rubber grommet, you can install those into these sensor mounting locations, and then install the sensors into those grommets from the back side of the bumper. And then we'll simply push these in place until they're flush with the front face of the grommet.
We've noticed on some of these GX 460s here that the new style sensors are a couple pieces. There's a little, once you get them out of the bumper rather, there's a little rubber collar that goes over the sensor right there. It's this little rubber boot, and we think they're to waterproof this sensor, but what they're doing is when you're trying to press them into these grommets here, it's kind of a nightmare. Everything's flopping around. They seem to pop out. So I think our best solution for this is to just take a small dab of RTV, black RTV, so it hides, and then just get your fingers dirty and wipe it around the perimeter of this sensor here. And that would probably be enough. What we're gonna do is we're gonna push this sensor in backwards from the bumper like we would normally. Then I'll show you what we're gonna do with this little O-ring. All right, once you get this pressed through the grommet, we're gonna take this little rubber part and we're gonna put a little bit of RTV on this, on the outside. And this is just so once they're set in the grommet that they all hold together. You don't have to worry about ever dealing with this again. So go ahead and take your finger from the back and press that sensor all the way through. Take that O-ring and put it on top. So then what you're gonna see is that rubber gasket or O-ring or whatever is sitting with its lip proud of our little grommet here. And then go and take a small flat blade screwdriver and work it in around, and then slowly press this rubber grommet behind the O-ring. It's gonna be a little finicky, it might take you a second, but this just assures that once this RTV dries, you don't have to worry about these sensors moving or anything like that. So just work your way around. You could probably use a small pick too, just watch them that you don't cut the little rubber thingy. So go ahead and work this around. And get it so everything is flush. And once that's done, just go ahead and press it so the sensor is flush of its little O-ring gasket thing, and then just slightly proud of our rubber grommet. And wipe the RTV off, you should be all set.
Now before this bumper goes on, now will also be the time when you can install a winch or any accessory lights that you're going to be running, because you won't be able to access this center section after the bumper's installed. All right, so one last thing before you get your bumper installed. If your vehicle's already equipped with our Victory skid plates, you're going to want to take just the front 2 bolts out of this and kind of let it hang down loose for now. And that way you don't have to fight that going on. You're going to have plenty of clearance to get everything installed. Now, to get your bumper installed, it's going to be super helpful if you have a jack with like a flat lifting platform like we have here. If not, just grab a couple buddies to help you lift it up in place. Now, after you have that bumper in place and all the mounting bolts loosely installed, you want to make sure everything's centered up on the vehicle, and then tighten those up to factory specs. After you get that tight, don't forget to come back and tighten up your lower engine skid plate if yours is equipped with that. Now, to get your turn signals wired in, you're going to need to go to your sensor wiring harness and find these gray connectors. There's going to be one on each side. Here, working on the driver's side, we found that the yellow wire on this connector is the power wire, and this white wire with a black stripe is the ground. So all we're going to do here is snip this connector off, and then you can use whatever style connector you want. If you want to get a nice weather pack connector or whatever you choose to use. In this case, we're just going to be using these small spade terminals. So on the hot wire, we're just going to put 1 spade terminal, and then on the red wire that's attached already to your turn signal light, you'll just use the corresponding spade so those two can simply connect together. Then on the white or ground side, I'm simply going to use a butt connector and install a small jumper wire portion with a ring terminal that I've already installed here, and that will simply get attached using one of these existing mounting bolts to the back side of that light where it's labeled ground. Now once you have those wires connected, you can just tie up any leftover harness out of the way. Next, for your inner fenders, you're going to need to trim some of this extra material off. So you're going to start out here on the outer edge, just below this factory mounting hole, and carry a line straight in to where it runs into this factory metal bracket. And then you can basically just trace that angle straight down the side to mark out your cut. Now to tie these up in place after we've made our cut, you can use the existing hole that we provided out here with a 1/4 inch button head bolt. And then in here, we actually moved this connector up into a different factory clip hole, which opened up this one down here. So you can simply drill a hole in this plastic and then either zip tie or bolt that in place down here to keep everything secure. So now that we have the bumper mounted up here on the vehicle, we're happy with our placement left to right and our gaps all the way around the front and everything. We need to get these tie-in brackets fully installed. So for that, you're just gonna grab these 3/8 bolts, washers, and flange nuts. You're gonna have 2 per side. These simply slide down in through the top of this bracket. Flange nut goes on the bottom side of that bolt. You're gonna have 1 out here. Then you can grab your second bolt for this side and reaching right through the front, opening in the bumper. We can install this one as well. Then once you have both of these 3/8 bolts loosely installed, you can come back with your 9/16 wrench and tighten them up, which will locate this bracket and hold it tight in place. Now after you have those top 2 bolts tight, that's going to do everything it needs to locate the bracket so that we can come back here and drill this hole in our factory frame. For that, we're going to need to open that hole all the way up to 5/8, which is a pretty big drill bit. So to get started, I'm just going to mark that with a center punch and a hammer. And then you can see I've got a few smaller drill bits here so that we can just work our way up so we're not trying to do all of that work with our larger 5/8 bit. Now, one important thing we want to note here, because you are going to be drilling through both the outside as well as the inside of this frame rail, is that you do have like a radiator and a cooler, I think an AC condenser, all in place right behind here. So you're going to want to protect that. So for that, I just grabbed a little scrap piece of metal we had laying around the shop. You can kind of slide that up in behind here. And then you'll just want to make sure that that's in place over this hole on the inside of the frame when you drill all the way through. Now one thing worth noting here too, as you can probably see when I'm drilling this line's getting pretty close to my drill chuck and maybe even a little bit close to my drill bits, so just be conscious of that. You may have to hold that out of the way while you drill through this frame. All right, and then now that we're up to a drill bit that's going to be long enough to reach through to the other side of the frame, you just want to be conscious that you're not drilling super crooked or anything, so just hold your drill nice and square, both up and down, front to rear, so that you come through nice and clean on the back side. So now that you got that drilled all the way out to 5/8, go ahead and grab your 5/8 bolt, washers, and nylock nut, and you can get that installed. This is a little tight back in here, so it may be easiest to get this washer on and then fish the nut back up in there and get it started. Next, you'll grab the provided P-clamp from your hardware pack and install that over the factory line. And then using the 1/4 inch button head bolt and serrated flange nut, you can bolt that into the provided hole in this tie-in bracket. Now this can be a little bit tight quarters in here, so just to show you how we got it done, I just used a 5/32 Allen bit and a 1/4 inch wrench, and that way you make a nice little low profile setup like this that you can get up in here to tighten up this bolt. Other than that, you'll just need to finish wiring up a winch if you're equipped with one, and any accessory lights you may have installed, and that'll complete your install. If you guys have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to us, info@victory4x4.com, or give us a phone call 269-459-8447.